welcome the three industrial leaders that we are going to talk here in the talk corner, who are Olivier Charmeil, Adrian Thomas, and Roberto Gardnick. Thank you. Voilà. You have your microphone here. Oh. Maybe you should take it off now. Have a seat, please, yes. So you heard what we were talking about with Brigitte Autran and Molana. Maybe you have a reaction about this discussion, and also the point of Leroy Hood and Samir Benmachari?
So maybe I start. Lee, I think you have been very clear in saying that the world of medicine is going to change in the next 10 to 15 years. Huh? It's clear that there is a lot of science out there. The science is there. The science is everywhere. But it's obvious, and things have changed in the last 10 or 15 years, when you remember that R&D people would work, very far from cities, in the woods, so that they wouldn't be influenced and that they could be really well focused. Now we see that we have to work all together. It's not anymore about confrontation, it's going to be about collaboration. It's about being able to develop all together, system biology, system medicine. We'll have to work with the regulator. We didn't talk so much about regulators, because we will have to work together, all together, in order to bring to the patients the new medicines.
Yes, Olivier Charmeil, you are the CEO of Sanofi, I didn't mention it. Maybe Adrian Thomas from Johnson & Johnson, maybe you have an opinion on that, on what's said?
Yeah, I think there was very little that was said that most people could argue with, because it was kind of self-evident. But in Australia, we like to kick the tires and look underneath the hood sometimes. And as I look at the promise of personalised medicine, I think, or even access, I think we have to acknowledge that it's not necessarily about biological systems or technology. These issues are cultural, they're economic, and they're very much political in nature. And I struggle a little bit with the answer to healthcare is to have a good diet and the microbiome, when we know that patients with chronic lymphocytic leukemia who have a Bruton's tyrosine kinase deficiency, and we treat that, are cured. So I think we tend to use very, very overarching and global statements, but I think as you think about access in healthcare, it's a balance, and it's a balance of the choices that are directed at the population versus at the individual. And I don't think that we can get beyond that. We can stratify down the population to subpopulations or niche populations, but I think the approach that we take in the end-of-life efficiency in oncology and advanced diseases is very different than it is in primary prevention, vaccination, diet, exercise, and being good people. So I think we have to look at that. I also think it's a little bit misleading to talk about, if no one does something, everyone will do it. The question of investment in healthcare for all the companies who are here and are wondering, what's their ability to develop a product or a service and commercialize that. Someone pays for the risk, and most people fail. And the notion that you can produce a product for $80, which is entirely true, is not the same as you can develop a product for $80. If I look at the HIV example, what happened there is the world said, rich countries and companies have to pay for the poor, and they should, and I think we all agree with that. It's about basic human nature, but at the end of the day, if we take that approach everywhere, there will be no investment in R&D, so it's a balance, and somehow we have to figure out the business model, but it's not as simple as, it's not as simplistic as sometimes people say.
Roberto Gardnick?
Yeah, if I may comment, I'm here representing companies that do cell therapy, gene therapy, sequencing of genes, and I should answer that, of course, I fully agree that technology will not be an obstacle and that personalized medicine is here and will be the reality. But let me a little bit go outside of my role and think of the title of this session, which is customized approach for global health. And global health meaning, of course, more health or actually wellness for most people. And by the way, talking also what we discussed today in our assembly, we shouldn't think that market access of new technology is only a problem of developing countries. It is a problem in the United States and in Europe and in very developed countries. I don't know about Australia, but probably maybe. And this is why I like customized in the title, because I think that we should more and more think when we talk about cooperations, about developing new approaches, of really customized, which means, yes, personalized, go into the gene codes, of course, stratifying by groups and then really go into personalized medicine. This is what our companies try to do. But also customized to the system of health. I think we all know, but we heard Alain Mérieux talking of 1,400 causes of cholera every day. They are not waiting for gene therapy, honestly. I mean, they might in some years. So we need to have an approach of customized to system of health, customized to geography. Diseases are geographical and health systems are geographic. So I would really urge also to consider customized therapy as the frontier where convergence of technologies, IT clearly is going to help a lot here. So when we talk about innovation in this field, and this is what some of our companies are doing, really, for example, rethinking also use of all drugs with the new technologies can really bring big benefits and be more sustainable maybe than other approaches. So this was the reaction I had, but
this has a cost, right?
This has a cost, absolutely. I agree with you. This is why we need to go the cooperation way, as was mentioned. Yes, R&D is not anymore an ivory tower, fortunately, and this is very welcome. And this is where, for example, in Europe, because we are a European association, not always the political parties and political stakeholders and the regulators are really up to speed to help this customized approach and, for example, customize the regulatory approval path or the market access, which we can talk for hours about in Europe or elsewhere, which is really not a technology obstacle. The obstacle is definitely cost, but cost is driven also by the approach, which is sometimes too rigid from many stakeholders.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very important point because the technology is moving very fast. And I think we need all together to do a better job, probably talking much more upstream. And I get back to the discussion with the regulators. You know, the more we are connected upstream with the regulators, the more we will be in a position to bring to the patients the new medicines. Today, we all know we are in Europe, and I think we need to be very proud of what we have achieved together. We have developed this centralized procedure. It makes the licensing or the registration process much faster. But on the other hand, if I take the example of vaccines, and I'm looking to the various countries of Europe, I realize that between the market authorization and the issuance of guidelines, depending on the countries, there might be 5 to 6 years. So we need to be much more connected and work as a community.
Do you know, I think one thing we haven't talked enough about is the patient centricity. So we've talked about the technology and the regulatory and reimbursement hurdles a little bit. But one of the interesting things is, as we think about access, really understanding that 2/3 of the world's population actually lives in self-pay. There's no government paying for their healthcare. They have to make choices themselves. And something that's very interesting, particularly in the biologics space, is there used to be a little bit of an urban legend that said that people who lived in Southeast Asia don't use biologics. And I said, why? Well, because it's cultural. Actually, it's not cultural, it's economic. Because from a patient perspective, they don't really care about response rates of 40% in a population. What they care about is, what's my cost to first benefit? What's my time to first benefit? How will I recognize that benefit and how will I afford it? And I think that we need to understand a lot more about the behavioral economics at the patient level as we think about broadening access.
You agree, Roberto?
No, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And the perception of the benefit goes also through what I was saying before, through the system, how the intervention is actually delivered. Because just to give you an example, if you have a very effective drug, but then it's not delivered to the right person or in the right way, or the compliance is not good, then the perception of the patient is that the benefit is not there, then the willingness to pay goes away. I absolutely agree with you. But it's again the whole system that needs to be adapted.
Yeah, if I get back to vaccines, it's obvious that what we are trying to do with vaccination and the various stakeholders is to have impact on individuals through communities. And we need to make sure that we design a system that allow, of course, large campaign of immunization to take place, which means that vaccines need to be available. I'm just back from heavy traveling in Asia, where it's obvious that today there is not the infrastructure, the clinics do not exist as such to go for large immunization campaigns. So how can we develop all together a system that would allow a broad immunization program?
What could be the solution for that?
I think it's a mix, as usual. It's multifaceted. It's working with the ministries of health and making sure that large immunization programs are put in place. It's also making sure that in certain countries where it's important that vaccines reach really rural areas, that we put in place the right system so that the vaccines product can reach each and every rural areas, and we know that logistics is, of course, a big issue. It's also meaning making sure that, if I get back, Gérard Collomb mentioned about dengue. For us, what we have decided to do is to go for dengue vaccination in endemic countries, in the areas where people suffer and die of dengue. So a well-targeted approach that will allow to have significant impact in terms of public health.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think I want to come back to something that you raised before, which is the need to work in partnerships. And we have a program in the company on Ebola, and what's amazing to me about Ebola is not necessarily the fact that it's a health security risk, it's the fact that for a relatively small mortality, the entire international community was able to come together and figure out financing flexibility, regulatory flexibility, how to partner on clinical trials and delivery, vast programs to advance local point-of-care diagnostics all happened around that. And if we really want to address access and affordability or science and access, that's the way we have to think, in a totally different business model. And it means co-investing in the risk as well as co-investing in actually the development and delivery.
Maybe you have a reaction, Samir Bamashari. I'm going to give you a microphone. Yes, please.
I completely agree with him that we need a complete paradigm shift in business model. All I can say, I won't well tell you the cost. Open source drug discovery of tuberculosis of India, where 8,000 people put their brain, which has allowed us to pull up the whole pipeline, including TB Alliance. We have gone ahead with the 3-drug MDR clinical trial. I don't want to tell the cost, but all I can tell, the WHO has spent more money in understanding and asking one of my friends in the United States to do a study, how open source business model. All I can tell, it is incredibly low cost. I cannot tell if I tell the cost, he asked me, don't tell the cost publicly. It is incredibly low. So if we can get crowdsourced knowledge, volunteers, patient contribution, data coming and participation from millions of students, but still, Sanofi Aventis can give a low-cost drug because our Santa Biotech made the cost low, which was acquired. So it's very important that at the end, we have to make the cost low, only to make it available.
And I fully agree with you, but as you know, it was actually Janssen, the pharma side of Johnson & Johnson, that developed the first new MDR TB drug in 40 years. And
Absolutely.
It was 200 million just to get to a phase 2 trial. Just to get to phase 2. 15 years of more research.
I'm only telling you.
So I'm fully on board with you, but I think
we
need
need
to
a
paint the
business
whole
model
picture.
difference. So as I said, who said that the way clinical trial is happening today is the best way? Today, if I come up with a drug which is equal efficiency, but 1/10 the price, I can do it, I won't be allowed. So we don't have Glivax. If we have Glivax, then 58 people clinical trial is good enough for phase 3. Look at the list of clinical trial. Why? Because phase 1, phase 2, we are making poor discovery. If our discovery is better, cost and discovery should come through massive computing with brilliant minds putting into it. It will not come through business model unless we come out the way. So if you really have that heart to think HIV, infectious disease, Ebola, problems of the world is solved, then we need a complete different business model.
So 2 or 3 comments from my side.
Yes,
It's
thank you,
obvious that today developing a vaccine candidate or developing a new medicine, as you know, it is extremely costly. I've been in this industry for 20 years, and of course, I've experienced more failures than success. And we know that the costs have been rising for various reasons in the last 20 to 25 years. Where I take what you say is that we are moving more and more into biologics. And it's clear that today we have a system that has been designed 40 or 50 years ago that will probably need to be adapted at some point in order to be more efficient. We know that the world is getting more and more fragmented also. You have the EMA, the FDA, you have, of course, all the other agencies, which means that it's a burden for the whole system. There are high transaction costs because, of course, when you want to register a new product in a country, if you go to the next country, you need the dossier under a little bit different format, and you see a lot of source of inefficiencies. So again, here, I think there are some value for us to get better aligned in order for the whole healthcare system to be more productive. Last point, yes, I think all companies today, because let's be honest, we didn't do a good job in the last 10 to 15 years. There's been huge innovation. What is important so that we are effective is that we are very selective in what goes out of discovery, so that we can bet, on medicines that at the end of the day are going to bring added value to the patient with a high probability of success. Because there is nothing worse for everyone than to allocate significant resources on projects that at some point are going to fail.
Maybe Brigitte Autran wants to react about the vaccines, which you are fighting for.
I fully agree with. I will fully agree with what you've said about vaccines, but what would you say about HIV vaccines? HIV vaccines have been a failure for 25 years. Would you mind that we should not have started developing HIV vaccines because we knew from scratch that we would be reaching failure? So it is a cost for the society, it is a cost for the pharmaceutical company, but we have to share the cost and we have to move forward because we need vaccines.
No, I totally support, and HIV is a very good example. HIV, given its complexity, and we are on our side part of a program, as you know, is not at the scale of one entity. We need to join forces. And the more we can do it from the upstream part, the better it is. So as a community, could we move faster on HIV? Probably. And I think there are experience, and we have been talking about Ebola. I was very interested to see that, yes, we have been talking together much earlier in the process.
Okay, maybe you want to add something because we have to close the session. Okay, so I'm going to thank you. Thank you, Adrian Thomas. Thank you, Olivier Charmeil, and thank you, Roberto Garlic. Thank you to all speakers. And I let you enjoy the rest of our BioVision.